Yes, ma'am. The red line has crept past the 4% contraction threshold. If we factor in foreign exchange exposure, this quarter's net is down 6.3. Claire Durrell, Chief Financial Officer of Forge and Dominion, stared at the blood-colored trend line projected against the boardroom's marble wall. Around the oval table sat 8 vice presidents, all sleepless, all defending slivers of fiefdoms within the 100-story tower that dominated Chesapeake City's skyline. Beyond the glass curtain wall, midnight lights sketched highways and river bridges, but inside, the only illumination came from the holographic charts flickering crimson. "Do you hear it?" whispered Theo Yuan from Strategic Risk. He hadn't spoken all evening. "Hear what?" Claire tried to keep her voice flat. He cocked his head, as if listening through the polished floor. "The grind, metal on stone." A laugh might have broken the tension, but no one felt humorous, because they all heard it too. A subterranean groan that rose through the aluminum studs and steel girders, vibrating laptop screens and coffee mugs. The sound had begun after the first profit warning 2 quarters ago. Back then it had felt like a malfunctioning HVAC duct. Now it carried weight, an ancient basso, as though bedrock itself rolled over in its sleep. "Facilities has no explanation," murmured Claire, shuffling her papers, but never looking down. To acknowledge ignorance in this tower was to bleed in water. "We'll revisit after Asia Pac opens." Meeting adjourned. Executives scattered. Claire waited until the boardroom was empty before leaning against the tempered glass. Far below, lights of the city traced pulsing veins. Avenues pumped car headlights, while neon billboards blinked like arrhythmic hearts. The tower's reflection merged with its neighbors, a mass of black mirrors. But in the panel just left of her shoulder, the glass bulged outward a centimeter. The first hairline distortion she'd noticed weeks ago. It seemed to breathe. When she finally rode the elevator down, the floors jittered. The readout, sub-basement 5, then 3, then 8, as if the cab itself couldn't decide where it belonged. Claire clutched the rail and felt a pulse through the metal. Thump, pause, thump, a heartbeat slowed by centuries. She exited at floor 17, unable to tolerate the descent any further, and cut across to archives. She needed answers beyond spreadsheets. The archives were tended by an 80-year-old caretaker named Esther Lowe, a silent woman who had come with the building when Forge and Dominion bought it 20 years ago. Legend said she had never taken a sick day, never left the tower for more than an hour's walk, and slept in a tiny apartment behind the stacks. She was rumored to read contracts like other people read tea leaves. Claire found Esther seated at a wide mahogany desk under a single sconce. Paper maps, brittle and ochre, covered every inch. "I expected you tonight," Esther said, without looking up. Her voice was as thin as the dust motes. "You know about the vibration?" Claire asked. "I know about the loss," Esther corrected. "And I know what loss stirs." Claire pulled a chair. "This building? Why does it feel alive?" "It is alive," Esther said simply, placing a parchment before her, a blueprint smeared with iron oxide. Rather than floors and elevators, the drawing rendered something humanoid. Arms folded along its sides, legs tucked beneath, the head bowed so the crown touched what the legend labeled heliport. "This tower," Esther said, tapping the chest, "is the breastplate of an iron golem. Its ribs are your elevator shafts. Its circulatory pathways carry fiber optics and water pipes. Its lungs vent server heat into sky." Claire tried to laugh, but the sound died in her throat. "Are you serious?" 700 years ago, Esther continued, Cheswick was swamp and forest. A guild of metallurgists forged a sentinel to defend their trade routes. They carved a sleeping enclave beneath the hill, primed the golem with a single directive: maintain dominion over this land as long as the pact of prosperity sustained it. They crafted a covenant, tribute flowed, settlements flourished, and the golem slept. She raised her eyes, pupils rimmed with molten amber under the lamplight. Prosperity and sleep were linked, decline and awakening the same. When fortunes fall enough, she tapped the blueprint again. The iron beneath stirs to reclaim. "But that's myth," Claire shook her head. "We bought this building from Belmont Grove Capital 2 decades ago. It passed all the geological surveys." "They never dug past 7 meters," Esther said. The Covenant discourages deep drilling. Claire tried to focus on tangible numbers: debt ratio, amortization schedules. Myths couldn't audit, yet the tremor underfoot contradicted denial. Somewhere inside the joists, metal tensed like muscle. "What triggers full awakening?" she asked, surprising herself. "The golem's core is a tally stone," Esther said. "Old as runes, it weighs fortune against ruin. If the scales tip past a threshold, some call it the seventh decimal, the sentinel rises. Corporate losses, civic debt, public despair, they all pour into the same trough. When emptiness outweighs abundance, the pact dissolves." "How close are we?" Claire whispered. Esther shuffled a series of recent P&L statements Claire had left on her chair. "Close." A deeper groan rolled through the archive, raining droplets of dust from ceiling panels. "We can fix revenue," Claire insisted, more to herself than to Esther. "Sell assets, restructure, raise capital." Esther's gaze settled on her with pity. "You think profit is only money, but prosperity is also belief. Look outside, storefronts shuttered, wages stagnant, commuter tunnels flooding. The city's spirit is in deficit." Claire felt a cold filament unfurl up her spine. "Then we have to stop it," she said, though she didn't know what it was. "How do you pacify a creature that is concrete, steel, and obligations?" "Restore surplus," Esther said, "or renegotiate the covenant." "How?" Esther folded the blueprint. The iron oxide transferred faint red fingerprints onto her palms. "The Heartstone sits in the sub-basement, encased behind the audit vault. You'll need to enter before the seventh decimal tips. Speak the language of ledgers. Offer a reason to continue sleeping." Claire stood. "Will you come?" "This tower obeys executives," Esther said, standing too. "It must hear from those who command the numbers." It was nearly 3 a.m. when the pair swiped through 56 levels of security descending into the sub-basements. Every floor thrummed louder, as though they passed down the throat of a great organ. When the elevator doors parted on sub-basement 11, the last official level, Claire smelled ozone and iron. A tunnel unfurled into blackness. Motion sensors flickered but failed. Esther lit an oil lantern from her desk, producing a bloom of amber. "Why bring that?" Claire asked. "Electrics hate awakened magic," Esther replied, and led on. The corridor widened into a cistern, big as a cathedral. The walls were raw bedrock, not steel. In the center, a slab of iron the size of a freight car floated half a meter off the ground, rotating imperceptibly. Symbols glowed across its surface, tally marks grouped in primes of 7, long as Claire's arm, each etched channel filled with liquid glass that waxed and waned like mercury. The cipher pulsed, scarlet, copper, gold, then fading again. A ring of shattered computer servers lay scattered, melted wires sparking feebly. Claire saw her company's nameplate on a charred mainframe. They had used this place as an off-grid data vault. No one had told her how deep it lay. "The Heartstone," Esther whispered. "It already counts." Claire approached. Each time the copper glow peaked, she felt a tug behind her sternum, like her own balance sheet was being pulled forward for audit. She recalled every layoff, every deferred upgrade, every shell entity parked offshore. Numbers on screens suddenly felt like moral weight. She turned to Esther. "You said speak the language of ledgers. What does that mean?" "Tell it why the covenant should persist. Present assets not yet booked." Assets not yet booked. Claire thought of synergies and intangible goodwill, but the words felt brittle. Another tremor rattled the cistern. Water dripped from ceiling cracks, and pieces of rubble plinked into puddles. The iron slab's rotation quickened. With every full spin, an echoing clang reverberated through the bedrock and up the tower's skeleton. If the sound reached surface streets she knew, windows would rattle from harbor to hills. She stepped within arm's reach of the slab. "I'm CFO Claire Durrell of Forge and Dominion," she declared, the way she might open a call with investors, but her voice wobbled in the vast chamber. "We manage capital, create jobs, innovate." Symbols flared red, and the slab's edge hissed within a hair of splitting. A streak of molten iron trickled down. "Try honesty," Esther urged. Claire swallowed. "All right, we cut corners. We chose short-term gains over long-term growth. We forgot the people outside these walls. We thought numbers were enough. A low hum followed, neither approval nor rejection. The slab's orbit slowed. What can we offer? We're weeks from solvency, Claire said. What can you redeem? Esther countered. Claire closed her eyes. Images flooded. The research lab shuddered to shore up quarterlies. The community clinic whose loan guarantee they rescinded. The row of bus shelters where laid-off machinists now sat idle. She had written off intangible assets, human factors, because auditors couldn't quantify them. Yet here, intangible surplus seemed the only currency. She spoke, voice cracking. If you grant us sleep, give us time, we will reallocate 2% of net to local infrastructure, accelerate green retrofits, reopen the lab, and I will step down the moment those commitments are notarized. The tally marks quivered, shifting lines into new columns. But the glow remained stubborn amber. Esther placed a frail hand on the iron flank. It wants collateral, she muttered. Pacts bind flesh to stone. Claire understood then. Downgraded bonds and goodwill promises meant nothing. Something living had to guarantee the covenant. She stared at her own reflection in the metal's sheen. Sleepless eyes, ash-blonde hair disheveled, suit smeared with dust. What was she willing to pledge? Before she could decide, footsteps clanged behind. A flashlight beam sliced through gloom. "Stop!" barked a familiar voice. Nathan Cromwell, CEO, strode into the circle, flanked by 2 private security guards in tactical gear. "Claire, step away," he commanded. "You're trespassing in a restricted archive." "How did you even get clearance?" Claire asked, still between him and the Heartstone. Cromwell smiled thinly. "I signed the clearances." The guards raised stun batons. Esther positioned herself before the CFO, lantern lifted like a tiny shield. Cromwell examined the floating slab with detached curiosity. "I caught snippets of your little bedtime story, Esther. Golem, covenant, blah, blah. Regardless, this thing is ours, and I will not allow sentimental theatrics to compromise our fiduciary duty." He produced a brushed steel case. Flipping it open, he revealed a thumb-sized crystal clamped inside a titanium harness. Our R&D fellows extracted a fragment last month, an incredible energy source, potential defense contracts in the billions. He nodded to the guards. "Install the harness, we'll tap the rest." "Remove that, and the golem wakes fully," Esther warned. Cromwell shrugged. "Maybe it's time it woke. We'll patent the miracle metal, license the tech. Revenues soar, city revitalized, shareholders ecstatic. Everybody wins." Claire felt the ground flex like a lung. One guard climbed a ladder to reach the slab. As he drilled to anchor the harness, sparks screamed against the iron, each one a shrill note of pain. The symbols erupted crimson, tally marks dissolving into jagged fault lines. A thunderous crack split the chamber. The slab slammed onto the floor, crushing the ladder. The guard rolled clear, but shrieked as his boots melted. Columns of dust avalanched from ceiling fissures. Sirens howled through every fiber optic cable above them, morphing into a primal wail. Esther gripped Claire's wrist. Decision time. But Claire already knew. Numbers, promises, or pledges. Nothing short of a living exchange would halt the awakening now. She stepped toward the Heartstone. Its surface had fractured to reveal a core swirling like magma, yet it radiated no heat. She raised her hand and pressed palm to core. The iron flowed, engulfed her arm to the elbow. Agony lanced up her nerves, but with it came clarity. Ledgers of the entire city flipped through her mind. Credits, debits, joys, despairs. She glimpsed Cromwell's offshore accounts, Theo Yuan's hidden philanthropy, a janitor's dream of starting a bakery. The aggregate weighed against a cosmic scale, whose fulcrum was her beating heart. "Claire!" Cromwell shouted, backing away. "Don't be rash. We can monetize this." She spoke, though her mouth never moved. The words vibrated through the chamber. "I pledge myself as surety, my breath for your silence, my life for 5 years' prosperity to this city." The magma glow dimmed to orange, then ember. Metal encased her torso now, but somehow she still breathed. Upstairs, the sirens choked off. The grinding heartbeat slowed. Cromwell rushed forward, but Esther stepped in his path. "Touch her, and you break the seal," she hissed. The CEO hesitated as hairline seams stitched shut across the Hearthstone's surface. On reflection, he saw not his own face, but an impassive helm, eyes closed, breath dormant. Within seconds, the slab floated again, silent, whole. Claire lay on the floor, free of metal. Her arm, though, from shoulder to fingertips, had turned iron gray. She flexed and heard servos whir. Sensation remained, but each gesture seemed to echo with mechanical precognition. She had become collateral incarnate. Esther knelt. "You spoke the old terms, but added new metrics. 5 years prosperity." "They'll need it," Claire whispered, "and Forge and Dominion must deliver." Cromwell started to protest, but the cistern lights flared violet. A script seared onto the iron slab, this time shimmering silver. The glyphs arranged into a language they all somehow understood. Break vow, wake iron. "Your board just got a new non-executive director," Esther told Cromwell, nodding at Claire's iron arm. "And she carries veto power." Months passed. Forge and Dominion issued an unprecedented community bond, funding riverfront restoration, public clinics, and the reopened research lab. Revenues lifted, though margins slimmed. True to her word, Claire resigned as CFO, but the board installed her as Comptroller of Covenant Affairs, a title that made investors laugh until they read the footnote. Long-term sleeping asset impairment risk. She worked from a modest office on the 70th floor, one level above the golem's nape. Every morning, she placed her iron palm against the structural column. If the metal felt cold and smooth, the sleep held. If she sensed even a ripple, she convened the oversight committee. Cromwell adapted quickly. He paraded the company's civic works on earnings calls, credited holistic metrics, and the market rewarded ESG compliance without grasping its literal foundation. Yet, at night, Claire sometimes saw him pause by lobby columns, listening. Cheswick City flourished in small ways. Bus shelters received solar canopies. Machinists retrained to fabricate modular housing. The clinic's waiting line shrank. The intangible surplus, the one auditors had once ignored, began tilting the cosmic ledger toward daylight. But Claire counted too. She felt them as heartbeats in her arm, one beat per unit of prosperity. She tried not to dwell on how many beats remained before her pledge matured. 5 years translated into a finite reservoir. Year 4, quarter 2. Claire sat in the boardroom again, now as observer. Profit had dipped a mere 0.5%, well within tolerance, yet a whisper of vibration tickled the soles of her shoes. Theo Yuan, still at strategy, presented a new initiative: spin off the green retrofit division to private equity. Higher margins, quicker paybacks. Claire watched the red and green bars slide across the projector wall. The room nodded. She cleared her throat. Divestiture removes 1,400 union jobs and offloads community benefits. The tally will notice. Cromwell smirked. Cost centers, Claire. We can donate a scholarship fund instead. She laid her iron hand flat on the table. Tiny filings danced toward her fingertips, drawn by magnetism. I remind the board, break vow, wake iron. Silence fell heavier than any earthquake. Then a new voice spoke, one of the younger VPs. Maybe we balance sheet goodwill, keep the division domestic, and accept a longer ROI, he suggested. Others echoed, motion passed, no divestiture. The vibration ebbed. Later, Cromwell approached Claire by the observation window. You've made your point, he said softly. Do you think 5 years will suffice? Can we renegotiate again when time's up? Claire looked over the city, now lit not only by office towers, but by regenerated parks and rooftop gardens. Prosperity isn't a term sheet, she replied. It's a living covenant. When my beats stop, someone else must pledge. The goal is to never let the scale tip again. Thunder rumbled through the sky was clear. Perhaps it was only summer air shifting in ducts. Perhaps a dream beneath stone turned over, half awake. Cromwell swallowed. Then we keep it balanced. Claire nodded, feeling the iron in her arm grow warm. She didn't know how many beats remained. Maybe 1 year, maybe 1 quarter. The ledger kept count. but she believed the city might finally be learning how to keep its own. Deep below, the colossal golem exhaled a sigh no seismograph could measure, and in that breath, the skyscraper settled 1 millimeter deeper into bedrock, content, for now, to keep sleeping through the hum of commerce, the chatter of streets, and the fragile accounting of human promises.